What's going on, everyone? So I was sitting here watching NBA Today on ESPN earlier, and man, they dropped some serious Warriors news that honestly caught me completely off guard. I mean, I knew the Warriors were exploring options and trying to figure out how to get back into championship contention, but the way the panel was breaking down this Donovan Mitchell to Golden State possibility, that was something else entirely. Let me walk you through everything that went down on the show because this is getting way more real than I think most people realize. So, they opened up the segment talking about how the Warriors are at this critical crossroads, right? You've got Steph still playing at an incredibly high level, but he's not getting any younger. Draymond's there, but he's also dealing with all his drama and antics. And the whole question hanging over the franchise is how do you maximize what's left of this championship window? That's when they pivoted to the Donovan Mitchell conversation, and honestly, the more they talked about it, the more sense it started to make. The first thing the panel really hammered home was Mitchell's desire to win a championship. Like, this isn't just speculation or reading tea leaves. Mitchell has been pretty vocal about wanting to compete for a title, and he hasn't gotten over that hump yet, despite putting up incredible numbers year after year. The analysts were pointing out that joining an established dynasty like the Warriors, even if they're not in their absolute prime anymore, gives him that legitimate shot at a ring. You're talking about playing alongside Stephen Curry, one of the greatest shooters of all time, and Draymond Green, who despite all his issues, is still one of the smartest defensive players in the league. That infrastructure, that winning culture, that championship experience, it's all right there, ready for Mitchell to tap into. Hey, what's up, everyone? Before we jump in, let me ask you something that takes 1 second. That like button? Hitting it right now helps this channel more than you know. It's how we reach thousands more fans with this content. Just smash that like button real quick. It's the biggest way you can support what we're building here. Every like matters, so hit it now. What really got me thinking was when they broke down how Mitchell could relieve so much offensive pressure from Curry. And I'm not saying Steph can't carry the load anymore, but at 36 years old, or whatever he is now, you can see that he gets worn down, especially in playoff series when teams are throwing everything at him. Mitchell is that dynamic scorer and playmaker who can create his own shot, get to the rim at will, and take over games when needed. The way they explained it on the show, having Mitchell would allow Curry to play more off the ball, which is actually where he's most dangerous anyway. Imagine Curry running around screens while Mitchell has the ball, and then Mitchell kicks it out for a wide-open Steph 3. Or vice versa, Mitchell drawing 2 defenders, and Curry getting free for one of those pull-up threes he loves. The offensive firepower would be absolutely insane. They showed some clips and statistics demonstrating how having a second elite scoring option would maximize both players' efficiency. Neither one would have to force things as much. And in crunch time, you'd have 2 legitimate closers who can get you buckets when you absolutely need them. That's something the Warriors have been missing since Klay Thompson stopped being that guy consistently. And speaking of Klay, the panel spent a good amount of time discussing how his uncertain future with the team plays into all this. The Klay situation is obviously complicated, right? There's so much history there, so much loyalty, but at the end of the day, the Warriors need elite shooting and consistent scoring from that position, and Klay just hasn't been that guy since his injury. They were talking about how Mitchell would essentially fill that void, and then some. Mitchell gives you the three-point shooting, but he also gives you the ability to create his own shot off the dribble, something Klay never really did, even in his prime. So you're getting an upgrade in terms of overall offensive versatility, and Mitchell's younger and presumably healthier moving forward. Now here's where it got really interesting, and this is information that apparently came out just recently in December. They mentioned that there are rumors suggesting Mitchell is alarmed by the habits and mentality of the Cavaliers organization. The way the analysts were describing it, Mitchell is concerned about whether Cleveland has that true championship mentality and culture needed to actually win it all. And look, the Cavaliers have been good, they've had success in the regular season, but there's a difference between being a good regular season team and having that warrior mentality, that championship DNA that teams like the Warriors have developed over years of success. The panel was really diving into this cultural fit aspect, and it makes total sense when you think about it. Mitchell has been on teams that underachieved in the playoffs, teams that maybe didn't have all the pieces or the right mindset when it mattered most. The Warriors, even when they're struggling in the regular season, have proven time and time again that they know how to win when the stakes are highest. They've been there, they've done it multiple times, and that institutional knowledge and championship culture is something you can't fake or build overnight. If Mitchell is genuinely concerned about Cleveland's habits and championship mentality, Golden State represents basically the polar opposite, a franchise that bleeds championship DNA. They also broke down the trade assets situation, which is crucial for making any of this actually happen. The Warriors have young talent like Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and they've got draft picks they could package together. From Cleveland's perspective, if Mitchell is potentially unhappy, or if they sense he might not re-sign down the line, getting a haul of young assets and picks could be attractive rather than letting him walk for nothing or trading him later when his value might be lower. The analysts were discussing how Warriors management has shown they're willing to be aggressive when they see an opportunity to add star talent, and Mitchell definitely fits that bill. Now, after spending a good chunk of time on the Mitchell possibilities and what it would mean for the Warriors' championship aspirations, the conversation shifted to last night's game against the Suns. And man, there was a lot to unpack there. The big story, obviously, was Draymond Green getting ejected again, and the panel did not hold back on this topic. They started by addressing what's been a long-standing conversation about Draymond, this idea that he's a selective bully who tends to target certain types of players, specifically European players and white players. And look, I've defended Draymond for years too, being a Warriors fan, always thinking maybe it's just coincidental, maybe people are reading too much into it. But last night when he went after Colin Gillespie, who's like 6'3", 190 pounds soaking wet, it was hard to deny that there might be something to this pattern. The way they broke it down on NBA Today, showing the sequence of events that led to Draymond's ejection, was really eye-opening. It wasn't just one isolated incident, it was this accumulation of things that set him off. First, Gillespie picked his pocket on a defensive rebound that led to a Dillon Brooks three. Then Brooks is shooting free throws a few minutes later and starts chirping at Draymond, getting under his skin. So now Draymond's irritated, he's going back and forth with Brooks. His emotions are running high. Then he blocks Gillespie and makes a point to let him know about it, kind of standing over him in that typical Draymond intimidation way. Gillespie gets up, gives him a little shoulder bump, probably says something back to stand up for himself, and that's when Draymond completely loses it, and Hockey checks him to the ground. The analysts were really questioning why Draymond reacted so strongly to Gillespie, but didn't have that same energy for Dillon Brooks, who was the one really antagonizing him throughout the game. If Draymond's going to chest up with somebody and lay down a hard foul, shouldn't it be Brooks given the history there and the fact that Brooks was the one talking trash? The panel was discussing whether there's an ego component where Draymond felt disrespected, that this smaller, less established player was talking back to him, and whether race plays into how he responds to different opponents. One of the analysts made a really pointed comment about how if that had been Royce O'Neal or another player with a different profile, would Draymond have reacted the same way? It's a fair question, and the uncomfortable reality is that the pattern of who Draymond tends to go after has been noticed by a lot of people around the league. The frustration expressed on the show was that Draymond owed the Warriors and owed the fans a response to Dillon Brooks for that cheap shot on Curry at the end of their previous game. And instead of directing his aggression there, he went after the easier target in Gillespie. They also talked about how Draymond basically called for the technical, like he knew what he was doing, and was almost inviting the ejection. And from a team perspective, that's incredibly selfish and damaging. The Warriors need him out there, especially with Kuminga not playing, and instead he let his emotions hijack the game. The panel wasn't pulling any punches, they were calling it like they saw it. which was a veteran player who should know better, allowing his ego to cost his team. The other major storyline they focused on was Jonathan Kuminga being out with illness, but there was some skepticism about whether he was actually too sick to play or if this was more of a statement about his situation with the team. They mentioned how Kuminga has been getting DNP'd in some games, how his role seems uncertain, and how things are clearly not ideal between him and the coaching staff. One analyst pointed out that once a player shows a willingness to just sit out for what might not be purely health-related reason, that's a red flag for teams around the league. It establishes a pattern that could repeat itself later in a player's career. They compared it to Jimmy Butler's situation in other stops, where he's been willing to kind of pack it in when he's unhappy, and the point was that this is something front offices pay attention to. Players like Steph, even in his younger days when things weren't great, or Clay dealing with devastating injuries, or even Draymond with all his antics, they show up and compete. But if Kuminga is developing a reputation as someone who might check out when things aren't going his way, that affects his trade value and how other teams view him as a potential acquisition. But here's where the game analysis got really interesting. They spent a lot of time talking about the emergence of Will Richardson and how sometimes the obvious answer is just the obvious answer. The Warriors coaches love to make things seem complicated and nuanced, but the panel was arguing that in this case, it was simple. Less Buddy Hield, more Will Richardson. And man, did Will deliver in his opportunity. They showed highlights of Richardson going 4 for 4 from downtown, making winning plays on both ends, cutting off the ball, crashing the glass, and playing fundamentally sound defense. The comparison they made was to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that type of winning role player who just does everything right and doesn't make mistakes. Sure, you'd love for Will to be 6'6", like KCP, instead of being undersized, but that's why he went 55th in the draft instead of being a lottery pick. The point is, his impact was undeniable, and the Warriors don't win that game without him. One analyst made a great point about how Richardson being in there probably helps cut down on turnovers just because he's so fundamentally sound and in control. The Warriors had 21 turnovers in the game, which is way too many. And having a steady hand like Richardson, who's not going to make careless mistakes, is valuable. They were also discussing how the Warriors might have been trying to showcase Buddy Hield for trade purposes, which would explain why his leash has been so long despite not being a great fit. Buddy still has value as a movement shooter, just probably not in such a prominent role. And when you attach his salary to Kuminga's, you're looking at $30 million in outgoing salary that could be used to bring back some really interesting pieces. The credit they gave Will was for staying ready so he didn't have to get ready. He could have been frustrated getting no minutes, but instead he stayed locked in, and when his number was called in a huge game, he delivered. That's the kind of player every championship team needs, and the panel was emphatic that he needs to be in the rotation moving forward, period. They talked about how rough the first half was, particularly that first quarter where the Suns just dominated, hanging 44 points on the Warriors. The defensive scheme was way too vanilla, according to the analysts, with the help defense being way too predictable and transparent. Phoenix was obviously hunting Steph Curry on defense through Devin Booker and Dillon Brooks, and the Warriors' help was coming so obviously and staying so long that it was easy to just draw the help and kick it out for open shots. The Suns shot 70% in that first quarter, which is unacceptable. They called out Jerry Stackhouse specifically, who's the defensive coordinator, questioning where his voice was and why the scheme wasn't more dynamic. Where were the stunts, the late help, the creative rotations to confuse Phoenix's offense? Instead, it was just straightforward. Here comes the help. Read it and make the skip pass for an open look. The panel felt like Stackhouse should have been more engaged, more animated, making adjustments, instead of just sitting comfortably on the bench. But then they pivoted to talking about Jimmy Butler, and this is actually the second straight game where he's been much more aggressive offensively. The analysts were praising the fact that he's been attacking more from the perimeter rather than just settling for post-ups where the passes become predictable and risky. He was getting downhill, making tough shots, showing off that elite triple threat game that makes him so dangerous. They showed highlights of him hitting several difficult shots, and one analyst joked about how Jimmy loves throwing up grenades, those super tough, contested shots that somehow go in. The point was that this is the version of Jimmy Butler the Warriors have been waiting for and expecting. Not just the bully ball in the post looking to get to the free throw line, but the versatile scorer who can attack from anywhere and create his own shot in different ways. This was game number 2 of really aggressive, dynamic Jimmy Butler. And if that continues, it changes everything for Golden State's offensive potential. They talked about Steph's performance being a little off, loose handle, not his sharpest game, just kind of a mortal performance by his standards. But the positive spin was that even with 21 turnovers, Draymond getting ejected, and Steph not playing great, the Warriors still found a way to win. That's a team effort, and it shows some character and depth that they could overcome all those obstacles. The rotation discussion got interesting when they mentioned GP2, Gary Payton II, coming in early and giving them solid minutes despite some initial skepticism. Brandon Podziemski, continues to shoot well off the bench, which is encouraging. But then they got into D'Anthony Melton, and the panel did not sugarcoat their disappointment. They acknowledged he's been off basketball for a year dealing with injury, but his performance has been underwhelming both offensively and defensively. The specific critique on defense was fascinating. They broke down how Melton tends to overreach, how he fouls when the team is in the bonus, and how he's become a bit of a foul magnet. The most damaging tendency they identified was how susceptible he is to getting rejected on screens because he's so thirsty to stay attached to the ball handler. They showed that play where the C parted for Booker to get an easy dunk, and it was because Melton got completely rejected on the screen. The analyst said if he was doing film work for teams playing against the Warriors, he'd tell his guys to reject the screen on Melton every single time, because it works almost every time. They weren't completely writing Melton off, acknowledging he needs to be part of the solution moving forward, but he needs to find his offensive rhythm and be more modest defensively, picking his spots to make plays rather than reaching and gambling constantly. It's one of those situations where you hope a player rounds into form as the season goes on, but so far it's been rough. The Lindy Waters 3 discussion was really positive, though. He entered the game for the first time to start the fourth quarter, because Draymond was gone and the rotation was shortened. The panel acknowledged that if Lindy had a disastrous 5 minutes with turnovers, offensive fouls, and missed shots, everyone would be killing Steve Kerr for throwing him into such an intense, physical game in the fourth quarter for his first action. But Lindy had a huge impact in his 7 minutes, hitting the glass, knocking down a big three, bringing energy like a Red Bull injection into the rotation. They called him and Trace Jackson Davis the Bounce Bros, because when they're both in there together, they're just all over the glass creating extra possessions. That energy and effort was crucial in a close game, and the panel gave Kerr credit for rolling Lindy out there, even though his hand was kind of forced by Draymond's ejection. Sometimes you need young guys to step up, and Lindy did exactly that. The refereeing discussion was brief but pointed. The panel felt the refs kind of lost control of the game, trying to hand out technicals to everyone once Draymond was gone, but lacking any real consistency with the whistle. Both teams were trying to flop and play to a bad whistle, with Booker and Steph both realizing the refs were having a terrible night and trying to take advantage. There was too much foul merchant behavior from both sides, and it made the game uglier than it needed to be. But at the end of the day, a win is a win, and the Warriors improved to 14-15, getting back to 500. They've got the Magic coming to town Monday, and the panel started looking ahead to that matchup. They brought up how the two key acquisitions the Warriors made this offseason, Melton and Kyle Anderson, really haven't given them anything yet, which is concerning. You make moves in the offseason expecting those guys to contribute, and so far, it's been minimal impact from both. There was also this discussion about Al Horford on the team, with someone joking, "Is Al Horford retiring?" Because he's been giving them absolutely nothing. The expectation is that a trade is coming, especially with Kuminga's situation, and Buddy's potential availability, and the Warriors need to consolidate some of these pieces into more reliable rotation player. The consensus on Will Richardson was that if he hasn't cemented himself in the rotation now, after that performance, then something's wrong. He provides stability, consistency, you know what you're getting from him, and he's always ready. That's valuable, especially on a team that's had so much chaos and inconsistency this season. Part of the theory is that some of the playing time for other guys was about showcasing them for trade, but Will has made it impossible to ignore him going forward. The segment wrapped up with the panel coming back to Draymond and expressing frustration that if he's going to chest up and hard foul somebody, it should have been Dillon Brooks given their history and what happened in the previous game. The somewhat uncomfortable but honest take was that Draymond let his ego take over because he couldn't let a smaller white player talk back to him like that. But he should have been targeting the actual bully in Brooks. Bully the bully, as one analyst put it. The whole situation left a bad taste, and maybe Draymond needs to sit a couple games and think about his actions. But ultimately, the Warriors got the win, which they desperately needed at this point in the season. Every game matters when you're hovering around 500, and finding ways to win, even when things aren't pretty, is what separates playoff teams from lottery teams. The panel felt this was a must-win game, and the Warriors delivered despite all the drama and adversity. So tying it all back to where we started, the big picture question hanging over everything is whether the Warriors can actually pull off something like a Donovan Mitchell trade. If the rumors about his concerns with Cleveland are real, if he's genuinely looking for that championship culture and winning environment, Golden State makes a ton of sense. He'd be joining an established winning system with Curry and the championship infrastructure already in place. He'd relieve pressure from Steph and create this devastating two-headed scoring attack that would be incredibly difficult to defend in playoff basketball. The trade pieces are there: Kuminga, Moody, draft picks, maybe some of these veterans like Buddy, who still have value around the league. If Warriors management is serious about maximizing what's left of Steph's prime and making another championship run, Mitchell represents that kind of move that could actually get them there. It wouldn't be easy to pull off. Cleveland would want a massive haul, but it's not impossible, especially if Mitchell is privately making it known he wants out. And if the Mitchell thing doesn't happen, the Warriors still need to be active at the deadline, making smaller moves to improve the roster. Getting Will Richardson into the rotation is a good start. Maybe moving Kuminga and Buddy for some reliable, proven role players who fit better. Finding a way to get more out of Melton, or replacing him with someone more consistent. There are paths to improvement even without landing the star, but the star would obviously be transformative. What do you guys think, though? Do you believe the Donovan Mitchell rumors? Would he actually fit with the Warriors' system and culture? And more importantly, what would you be willing to give up to get him? Would you trade Kuminga, Moody, and picks for Mitchell? Or do you think that's too much to give up? And what about last night's game? Was Will Richardson's performance enough to earn a permanent spot? Or do you think they'll go back to the same rotation? Let me know in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious how Warriors fans are processing all of this. The season is at a critical point, and the decisions made over the next month or two at the trade deadline are going to determine whether this team makes any noise in the playoffs or if it's just another disappointing year. The Mitchell possibility adds this whole other dimension of hope that maybe, just maybe, the Warriors can recapture some of that championship magic. But even if that doesn't happen, they need to be smart, they need to be active, and they need to maximize the talent they have. Because wasting another year of Steph Curry's prime would be a tragedy, and everyone in the organization knows it.